afternoon and welcome to this Jerusalem Press Club briefing. My name is Ari, Press Director of the club. A lot has been going on recently, particularly in our northern neighbor to the north, in Syria. And over the weekend, the militias loyal to Ahmed al-Shara, aka al-Julani, leader of that country, descended on Syria's western coastal towns, butchering Alawite Syrians. Videos emerging from Syria have shown al-Shara's forces executing them without trial. Israel has condemned the violence and called on other countries to do so as well. The weekend's events unraveled much of the new Western-oriented identity that al-Shara has been carefully constructing ever since he took over the country. Israel, meanwhile, has always been suspicious of him, and Defense Minister Israel Katz issued a warning last week against harming the Druze population in southern Syria. To discuss the direction in which Syria is heading and whether Israel is right to intervene on behalf of the Druze population there, we're pleased to welcome Colonel in Reserves Dr. Jacques Neriah, former Deputy Head of the Assessment of the IDF Military Intelligence and former Foreign Policy Advisor to Prime Minister Yitzhak Rabin. Currently a Special Analyst for the Middle East at the Jerusalem Center for Security and Foreign Affairs. Thank you so much, Dr. Neriah, for joining us today.
Thank you for having me.
My pleasure. I'd like to first ask if you agree with the introduction I just laid out. We've also seen many varying numbers regarding the number of Alawites killed in the past few days, ranging from a few hundred to well over 10,000. I'm wondering if you have any clarity in this.
Well, I beg to differ a little bit because I mean the whole event that unraveled in western Syria are the product of a counter-coup led by former officers of the fourth division, the famous division of Maher Assad, the brother of the President Bashar Assad, and together with some involvement of Iran and Hezbollah. They tried, in fact, to foment a putsch against the regime, and this was after the attempts by the regime to stop or to arrest former officers and former criminals of war that are accused of brutal murders of thousands and thousands of Syrians. Let's remember that Bashar Assad is responsible of the deaths of 600,000 Syrians and of the disappearance of more than 60,000 of Syrians that you don't know where they are. So, in fact, they were after an officer in Jabla, in the town of Jabla, and in fact, they fell into an ambush that was prepared by Brigadier General Abdallah, one of the high-ranking officers of the fourth division, armored division of Maher Assad, and as a result of this ambush, about 50 to 60 members of the security forces were killed there. And in fact, it was a premeditated ambush because at the same time, the same hour, you had events that started in Hama, Homs, Aleppo, Deir ez-Zor, Hasakeh. It means that the whole north was in fact on fire just to counter the authority of al-Julani. And al-Julani had not, they didn't have enough forces or units at the time, and he had to call for reinforcements coming from the Idlib province south of the border with Turkey. And this was, in fact, the nest where most of the jihadists were still there. And as a result of that, Chechen militias, Uyghurs militias can enter into the Alawite province and were responsible, in fact, those were responsible of the killings, of the executions that were carried out there. In fact, we are talking about a total of about 1,500 people killed, between 200 to 400 members of the security forces of al-Shara and all the rest civilians and others and other, I would say, remnants of those of the opposition loyal to Bashar Assad. This is in fact what happened there on the ground. It took 24 hours for al-Shara to recover and to take control of all those cities. And at this moment, it seems that, I mean, the cities are in control of by the government, but still, I mean, Latakia, the whole region is a mountainous area. And all the opposition has found refuge in the mountains. So, I mean, we're talking about 5,000 to 10,000 fighters that are still there, and the fighting is still continuing there, but it is no more in the cities. This is more or less what's happening today in Syria. And what is more interesting is the fact that at the same time, al-Shara succeeded in signing an agreement in principles with the Kurdish, with Mazloum, the head of the Kurdish, the Kurdish coalition on the east. And just a few moments ago, Al Jazeera published that again an agreement was reached also with the Druze community in Syria, which means that al-Shara has secured, in fact, his rears, where on the one hand he has agreed, in fact, a sort of autonomy given to the Kurds and to the Druze, and under the wings of the Syrian state, which is not a Syrian state centralized. I mean, al-Shara has decided on decentralizing Syria, and this is the best solution for him for the time being. What does this mean for Israel? Israel has claimed, we have from day one, we just destroyed all the arsenal of the Syrian army. We just went into the demilitarized zone that existed between us and Syria since 1974, the disengagement agreement, and went even further to Quneitra and other places. And I mean, after destroying most of the arsenal of the Syrian army, we just also claimed a sort of patronage over the Druze, and threatened al-Shara that if he would try to harm the Druze, Israel will intervene, to such an extent that when events happened in a town in a suburb of Damascus, Israel was ready to engage the al-Shara forces, because this was a majority-led city. So in the meantime, because of those agreements, and we just remember that only yesterday al-Shara had an interview with Reuters, and he said that all the declarations by Israel against him are nonsense, because he has no intention to turn Syria into a springboard to attack Israel. In fact, the enemies of Israel, Hezbollah and Iran, have been defeated in Syria. So there's no real reason for Israel to continue on its path of brutal approach towards the regime, and claiming, of course, that the sanctions should be lifted from Syria, etc., etc. This is more or less the situation today. I'm open for any questions.
All right, there's a lot there that you shared with us, and I appreciate that very much. It certainly gives a different additional perspectives to what we're seeing, and some of the information that's coming out, and events are certainly moving very, very quickly, and changing there quite rapidly as well. There's a lot there that you spoke about. I want to kind of unpack a little bit more some of what you discussed. One of the issues that you talked about is, what was actually happening here with the Alawites and the regime, and I've also heard reports of Iran being involved in kind of instigating this violence on some level to try and destabilize the country further. I'm wondering if you can comment on that as well.
Well, the al-Shara was very subtle when he declared that there is a foreign hands involved in this in the events in Latakia, in the coastal region of Syria. In fact, he was pointing at Iran. Iran was, since the very refused to accept the fact that Bashar Assad is no more there, and that it has lost its major ally in the region, and by the fact that Syria fell, the whole Shiite axis has suffered a very huge setback, because Hezbollah now is isolated from Iran. The logistics that went through the Syria are no more there, and certainly that Iran is eager to restore a sort of I would say not domination, but interventionism inside Syria, meaning that Syria has to take care to take into consideration Iranian interest, which is right now not the case because Syria has turned to Turkey on the one hand, and on the other hand, it's Saudi Arabia and all the enemies of Iran. I mean, in the Gulf states are involved today in backing and supporting al-Shara. This is the situation today, and I mean, as I said, Iran is fingered out and say this is the Iranian involvement. And in fact, I mean, we are waiting to see some of the rebels that, or sort of the opposition to al-Shara, if by any possibility we will have some details and some proofs about the Iranian involvement, which will certainly have been leaked to the local press.
Yeah, and you spoke about a lot of different issues. I want to focus for a second on the agreements that were signed now with the Kurds and the Druze, and whether also how does the Israeli operation last night targeting surveillance devices, command centers, and other military targets, whether that plays into these agreements, whether that's also part of that driving some of this desire to have these agreements. What does it mean? What do these agreements mean for the future of Syria in the long and short term?
Well, you know, according to the latest information, it seems, I don't know, I'm not sure of it, but this is the information that we have. It seems that there is an American involvement in reaching the agreement between the Kurds and the al-Shara. The Kurds have been fighting all the time for recognition of a special status. The special status relies on two things, where the use of their language, Kurdish, as an official language, and second, of course, is their autonomy concerning the way they try to manage their wealth. It's mainly gas and oil there, and of course, I mean, not to be subjected to restrictions by the Syrians. By the way, I mean, Hafiz al-Assad and Bashar al-Assad refused to recognize the fact that Kurdish should be an official language together with the Arabic. And this is something that has been now discussed. As I said, it's an agreement in principle. According to this agreement, Syria, the central regime would be responsible of the borders between Syria and Iraq and Syria and Turkey, which were in a way it's preventing the Turks to intervene and preventing the Iranians to intervene. So on the other hand, all the military units of the Kurds would be in a way integrated in the broader Syrian army, leaving them a sort of autonomy. So as far as al-Shara is concerned, the Kurds are now in agreement with him, even though, as I said, this is a decentralized Syria that we didn't know, and we didn't know for the last 50 years. Because what was cementing Syria as a state for the last 15 years was the regime of fear, the threats, and the brutal behavior of the regime. Now, this is one thing concerning the Kurds. As far as the Druze were concerned, the Druze are considered by the Sunnah, by the Sunnis, the main current of Islam, and certainly by the jihadists, the Druze are considered to be heretics. Because, I mean, their religion is different. It is a sort of Islam, but it's different than the traditional, the customized Islam. And as such, I mean, they were constantly attacked by jihadists and by Syrian. And the only regime that accepted them, in fact, was the acceptance by the Bashar and Hafiz Assad regime. And they were, in a way, the backbone of the Syrian army, because the officers came from the Druze community, and now they have succeeded. It seems so to have a sort of recognition of their status, meaning that, I mean, the central regime will not dominate and will not curb any attempt to change or to deal with the Druze religion. They will leave them, I mean, as is today, as long as they see themselves part of the Syrian state. And if this is so, I mean, the Sueda agreement with the central regime, it means that Israel has no more to do with the Druze, because the Druze have chosen to be part of Syria and not to be part of Israel. But I mean, let's see what will happen the next day. If this agreement, which is in principle, will be implemented, it's the same concerning the Druze and concerning the Kurds.
Okay, I want to ask a number of questions here that have come in, particularly regarding this issue of the Druze and Israel's role here. I think it can be spoken just in general. Israel has said many things. We've seen them making statements, getting involved, saying we want to have workers come in, all kinds of issues. I guess the question is also, I'm going to bundle up in a few questions here together. But the question being, of course, is this the right policy of Israel towards the Druze? How is this also? We see very mixed reactions by the Druze in Syria to Israel's comments and reactions and interventions. And so the question, I guess, would be on that level. And I want to just also, well, let's talk about that for a second, and then I'll ask these other questions as well that have come in.
Okay. When we talk about the Druze in Israel, we have an idea that the Druze is a community, a unified community, a homogenous community. Well, this is not the case. The Druze are divided in three groups. The ones that are in Lebanon, under the leadership of Walid Jumblat, the Jumblat family and the Arslan family, they are divided there, but it doesn't matter. This is the Druze in Lebanon. The Druze in Israel, led by Amin Tarif, the Sheikh Amin Tarif, and the Druze in Syria, led by Sheikh al-Hajri. Al-Hajri, Amin Tarif, and Walid Jumblat do not agree among themselves. Walid Jumblat believes that he wants to be the leader of the Druze community, and he is refused by both Amin Tarif and by al-Hajri to accept this status. Because of that, we have to be very careful. We have to be very careful when dealing with the Druze community in Syria. I mean, the talking about letting them work in Israel and so on, and it doesn't help much. Doesn't help much the Druze community in Syria, because if they are involved with Israel, then they will have trouble with al-Shara, and they don't want to fight al-Shara, so they will try to walk between the lines and see what is possible. I believe, I hope that we don't have in mind, that our government doesn't have in mind an idea like we had in Lebanon. I mean, we were droning in the Lebanese swamp for more than 20 years. Let's hope that we are not going to drone in the Syrian swamp, because Syria, as Lebanon, is a country of minorities. You have the Sunnis, you have the Shia, you have the Alawite, you have the Melkites, you have Assyrians, Druze, Kurds, and whoever and who else, and Armenians also. So I mean, this is a country that, I mean, a melting pot, and the only thing that catch that or cements that together is the central government. But at the time of Bashar Assad and Hafiz Assad, brutal force, and right now is decentralizing, which is much more clever. So in this atmosphere, I don't think that Israel has much to do with the Druze community in Syria. It has to just look after its own interests. And if our interests are set as the beginning of after the takeover by al-Shara, we said that our presence in the demilitarized zone and further near Quneitra was only temporary, because we wanted to check the intentions of the Syrian regime. Now we hear different litany, and this litany says that we will stay in place as long as it is needed. So let's see what's happened. I'm not for that solution. I believe that there is a chance, and certainly if the Americans are involved here, to reach a greater agreement, where maybe not a normalization with Syria, but maybe a state of coexistence, or the normal coexistence, without going further, because I don't think that this is the time. The time is not ripe, neither for Syria nor for Israel, to reach a peace agreement. This is not the case today.
Okay, we've had a number of additional questions come in. Some of them I believe you've probably touched on, but I want to just ask them specifically as they've come in here, and perhaps you can refer to them as well. A lot of them have to do with Israel's policy in general towards Syria, not just the Druze, but in general. So I'm going to ask, they have the reactions in recent massacres of civilians conducted by the forces affiliated with the new Syrian regime revealed Islamist or jihadist character of those forces. I know we discussed, we just said, but I wonder if you can kind of comment on that again. What should Israel's takeaway be from these events?
Well, we've been, I don't think that Israel was silent for the last, let's say, since 2011, the beginning of the civil war in Syria. But I don't think that there is so much emotion today. I mean, compared to what, I mean, for the last 14 years in Syria, where 600,000 people were killed and 6 million Syrians were just turned into refugees, about 10 million displaced from their villages, and their villages invested by militias coming from Pakistan, from Afghanistan. I mean, where was Israel? I mean, are we so much emotional because of what happened only 2 days ago? And when the Syrian helicopters used to throw barrels of explosives on civilians and used to gas civilians, used to take civilians in helicopters, take them up to 300, 400 meters and throw them out of the helicopters. This we did not react. I think that the violence is the same from both sides. This is a cycle that both sides understand much more than we understand, because this is not the way we behave. We look at their behavior as if these are our values. They are not our values. There are more Muslims that killed Muslims than Muslims killed by Israelis. So certainly this is not the case, and I think that by stressing the fact that this was a jihadist, I mean, there's an agenda. The agenda is very clear here, to say that these are people that you cannot rely on, you cannot count on, and this is why we have to stay ad aeternum in the Syrian area. This is the situation, and I don't agree with that.
Okay, well, I mean, that's another question here, is whether you have an estimate of when Israel would withdraw to the pre-December 2024 line, which I understand from you, you believe there is no current estimate for when that withdrawal would take place.
Well, as I said earlier, the latest declarations say very clearly that we will stay as long as we have to stay. So I don't know how long this is going to take. And certainly, I mean, there's no time limit set before, because at the beginning it's only temporary till we see what's happening in Syria, to see how the regime consolidates itself, to stabilize, and so on. Right now, there's only a worse attitude. The worst attitude is that only yesterday or the day before yesterday, our chief of staff visited the area and said we have to be prepared for a 7th of October attack from the Syrian side. Who is going to attack from the Syrian side? I don't know.
Well, perhaps that's the idea of the post 7th of October view, is to be prepared regardless. But so Ron Bani Shai in Yediot Achronot wrote today that Israel is aiming at implementing 3 zones in Syria: a buffer zone, a security zone, and an influence zone. Do you think this is realistic? The question also, a broader question that's been asked by a number of journalists here, is overall, what do you think Israel's view of the current Syrian regime is or should be?
I saw lately maps that were published in the social media and other places concerning the future of Syria. And in fact, those maps that were published were in fact a replica of what was meant by the French mandate in the 1920s, Alawite Republic, or the sort of state, the Druze state, the Kurd state, and so on. I mean, the partition, in fact, the partition of Syria. And I think for all those who are hoping or wishing that to happen, that this will not happen. This will not happen, because the Kurds and the Druze know very well that if they are in trouble, Nobody will come from Israel. No division will just drive into 1,000 kilometers to go into the Kurdistan and help the Kurds there. And no, how could you justify to an Israeli mother that her son is going to fight for the Druze in Sueda? What do we have to do in Sueda? So this is the way I look at things, and we have to look at our interests. Our interests are very near the border. Interests are that we are just less than 40 kilometers from Damascus. Let us remember that. I mean, we are not very far from Damascus. So, the Syrian regime has to look into what Israel's policy in order to understand that it cannot go and defy Israel too much. And has to maintain a sort of status quo with Israel. And this is why right now, the Syrian regime is concentrating on consolidating itself, on stabilizing the regime. And if we are going to continue, defying the regime, we will find at the end of the road, maybe not tomorrow, maybe not in a month, not 2 months, maybe a year, 2 years from now, after stabilization and after consolidation, we will have turned Syria into a new enemy. That's it.
Okay, there's a lot to think about here. And I want to also address a couple of other issues that were raised very briefly in our discussion and talk a little bit more about them. A couple of questions that have come in about them. One about the decentralization that you spoke about in the government of Syria right now. And what does that decentralization mean for the smuggling industry, particularly for Captagon?
Well, the drug industry was in fact the private reserve of Maher Assad. The Assad family made their billions producing Captagon. And this industry right now has been stopped by the central regime because, I mean, even the jihadists, the toughest jihadists cannot accept that. They do not accept the drugs as the traffic of drugs. So I don't think that this is going to change for the time being. I don't think that al-Shara will just now concentrate on the Captagon the industry in order to get some foreign assets in the Syrian coffers. This is as far as the drugs are concerned, and I mean we've seen all those the reports coming from Syria where these Captagons were produced. I think that the regime has decided very toughly to deal with that, and all those who were involved in the drug industry are being arrested and certainly will be tried in Syria. As far as decentralization in Syria, well, you know, Syria has few towns in the north and few towns in the south. And every area is more or less belongs to an ethnic or sectarian area. The Alawites in the north, the Kurds in the east, and the Druze in the south. And I think that by giving them by installing decentralization and keeping the borders under the control of the central government, this is a way for Syria to survive and to combine all the efforts to maintain a sort of a unified state. And this is the only way it can do, because if it is going to impose its power on the Druze right now or on the Kurds, then we will be just shifting into a new civil war, and this is what Shah doesn't want to.
Okay, I want to zoom out for a second. A couple of questions here regarding the broader perspective of the role of Turkey. Many say he was trying to leverage Iran's weakness to rebuild a kind of Ottoman empire. And how do Russia and Turkey's conflicting interests play out in Syria in the context of the Russian-Iran-China triangle and the US-Russia evolving relationship?
No doubt that Turkey, now it's we shouldn't say Turkey, we should say Turkey. This is the Turks will be mad if we call them Turkey. So Turkey will have a central role in Syrian politics. It has harbored the jihadist organization in Idlib, and it has protected in a way the Islamists. And I think that there's a sort of the Syrian the Turks would be ready to take over the role of Russia by providing Syria, the new Syrian army equipment produced in Turkey. And we know that Turkey has a very huge industry that is there. Nevertheless, we have to remember something very basic. Arabs and Turks cannot live together. Arabs and Turks have a different way of thinking, a different way of behaving, and Turks never liked Arabs, and Arabs never liked Turks. So there's a limit of that. We won't see Turkish units on the border in the Golan. Certainly not. We won't see a sort of relationship between Turkey and Syria as it was under Bashar Assad with Iran and Hezbollah. This is not going to be the case because there's a sort of basic difference that will persist between the two countries.
Okay, thank you. I have just a few more questions here, and then I'm going to let you go. I know it's a busy day with everything that's going on here, all around. Again, we touched on this very briefly before, but it has to do here's questions coming in now about the Israeli operation last night, targeting various sites, and what is the purpose of these operations, what kind of impact they're having, and whether they're also touching on some of the internal Syrian rearrangings that are going on right now as well.
Israel is concentrating on the remnants of the Syrian army that was part of the Bashar regime. And it is hitting targets that have a potential use by the new army against Israel, be it radars, be it anti-aircraft positions, being depots of weapons, being of ammunition, and other places. And this is, in fact, as I said, Israel has to look for its own interests. The own interests are there to prevent the buildup of a new army based on equipment that was given by the Soviets and by the Iranians, the Russians, sorry, by the Russians and by the Iranians. And this is what Israel is doing. It has been only the day before yesterday, more than 40 raids, aerial raids were conducted against targets in Syria, meant to just neutralize the positions and depots of weapons that were part of the old Syrian army. As long as this happens, and we don't hit the new Syrian army, I think that Bashar can accept the situation and will not do anything to counter that. So this is what we are witnessing right now. And as long as we show our intentions to maintain our interests safe, I think that Bashar understands very well that he will not step into a position right now to be active or to light a new active front against Israel.
Just a couple more questions have come in, which I'd like to have the opportunity to ask. One is, how does Israel assess the growing influence of extremist groups like HTS and all of these other kind of organizations, bodies, soldiers, whoever who are coming into the region? What kind of impact do these kind of groups have on regional stability?
Well, we've seen that Bashar has very swiftly at the beginning integrated most of the militias in the new Syrian army. In fact, I mean, the only faction that was not integrated in the Syrian army was the Free Syrian Army. The Free Syrian Army, which was trained and equipped by Turkeys. All other militias were integrated in the Syrian army, and even their commanders were given ranks in the new Syrian army, whereas the Turks, the Turkish, Syrian army, the new Syrian army, were not retributed and were not advanced in the ranks of the Syrian army. So there's a difference. If all the militias have been integrated in the Syrian army, certainly not. There are militias like the Chinese, like the Chechens, which part of them, I mean, they cannot be part of the Syrian army because they don't speak Arabic. So they are still there in the Idlib region. By the way, in the agreement between the Kurds and the central government has agreed that all the Daesh members that were arrested by the Kurds remain in Kurdish jails, which is a real innovation.
So much to think about, but I'm going to ask just a couple more questions that have come through. One is asking about the Hermon and whether you think al-Julani will want to be recapturing the Golan Heights at some point, or kind of what's going to be happening with the various sides of the Hermon.
I think at a certain point there will be an initiative, a political initiative. I mean, diplomacy is the art of the impossible. And the diplomatic activity will be directed at reestablishing the agreement, the disengagement agreement of 1974, according to which, I mean, there's a certain demilitarized zone, and maybe it has to be changed. But I think that this will come with under American supervision, control, and even I think the American will be definitely engaged in trying to reduce the tensions between Syria and Israel. And I don't think in the future, I mean, I'm just here a very simple citizen that analyzing situation. I don't think that Israel will remain forever on the Syrian Golan. I mean, on the Syrian Hermon. This is I don't think so. I don't think that in any agreement that will be the hammer between us and the Syrian, that the Israeli presence on the Mount Hermon would be accepted.
All right, I have two last questions here that I'm not entirely sure you have thoughts on. One, reporter's asking, this is almost a conspiracy, but what do you think about speculation that Israel is behind the counter-coup?
Israel is counter-coup. There are lots of people who say that we have that Israel and Iran have the same interest to the fall of Bashar, and who will replace him? Who will replace him? So, I mean, this is nonsense. Definitely nonsense. I mean, we know for sure now that a brigadier general called Dalla, the Reis Dalla, one of the high-ranking officers of the 4th Armored Division, the division of Maher Assad, Bashar Assad's brother, is the one that is the initiator of this counter-coup together with Hezbollah, together with Iran. So looking for Israel behind that, this is really nonsense.
Okay, I think we're going to end it there, unless there's something else that you would like to add to our discussion. Although I think we talked a lot about this, a lot to think about, a lot as always to unpack about what's going on in Syria, Israel's interests there, obviously particularly with a post-October 7th perspective on protecting the borders and everything that's going on. A lot to think about there. So thank you so much for your insights and for your time. And thank you also so much to my colleagues, Jonathan Beck and Ali Noor, for facilitating this briefing. And as always, to all the journalists on the line, we're always available if you would like to reach out and if we can help in any way. Thank you all very much.
Thank you.